I'm Laverne Cox, and this is how it got better. I was born and raised in a city called Mobile, Alabama, and I was born to a single mother, and I was born 7 minutes before my identical twin brother. Growing up in Alabama was challenging for me, I think partly because our family, we were really poor. My mom had to work 2, sometimes 3 jobs to take care of my brother and me, and she was doing it by herself. It was also difficult because I was bullied, like, big time. As a kid, I was very feminine from like my whole life. And from my very first interactions with kids, I was called sissy, I was called the F word, I was called names. The kids who beat me up were often boys, but everyone made fun of me. Everyone called me names. And from early on, I learned how to put on a brave face, even though things weren't always that good. I had no way of really understanding that I could be the girl that I believed that I was. And everyone was telling me that I was a boy. And in 3rd grade, Miss Ridgway, my 3rd grade teacher, called my mom and said, your son is going to end up in New Orleans wearing a dress if we don't get him into therapy right away. My mom said, you shouldn't act like this. She didn't want people to think she was a bad mother, I think. And I was a good student, and I was, I wasn't a troublemaker, but like, I was really feminine. And this is like a thing that needed to be policed. Basically, my teachers were policing my gender. The other kids who bullied me were attempting to police my gender. My mother was policing my gender, so there was all these different forces growing up that were telling me that who I was authentically was a problem, that I shouldn't act a certain way, that I shouldn't hold my hands a certain way, that I shouldn't walk the way that, all these things that felt very natural to me. I was told that I should not do them. The shame is what kills you. Believing that you are unworthy of love and belonging, that who you are authentically is a sin or is wrong, is deadly. Who you are is beautiful and amazing. It's important with all of the messages that might tell you otherwise, that you have that in yourself to say that I am beautiful, I'm smart, and I'm amazing. Earlier this year, I spoke at Tulane University, which happens to be in New Orleans, and it took over 20 years for Miss Ridgway's prediction to come true, but I finally ended up in New Orleans wearing a dress.
Transgender people identify with or express a gender that differs from the one which corresponds to their sex at birth. Their gender identity is different from their biological sex. For example, a transgender male to female will have the biology of a male but feel as he is a woman, dressing and acting like society's definition of a woman. To understand the term transgender, it is important to also know the differences between sex and gender. Sex is assigned to a person at birth and is based upon one's biological makeup, while gender is the expression of one's sex. For example, people express their gender through the clothes they wear, the style of their hair, and the activities they participate in. Other important terms to understand are intersex, a person who has reproductive organs or external sexual characteristics of both male and female. This has more to do with sex than gender expression, and is formally known as a hermaphrodite. Gender nonconforming, people who identify as a man and a woman, which is bigender, neither gender, which is agender, and people who move between genders, which is gender fluid. Other terms include genderqueer and non-binary, but there are many other ways people like to identify their gender. A cisgender person's gender identity matches the sex they were assigned at birth. Gender expression is completely different from sexual orientation, which is who one is sexually attracted to. People can be heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, just to name a few terms on the large spectrum of sexual orientations. These terms are constantly changing as society creates new words to describe the vast identities of sex, gender, and sexual orientation. Transgender students face many problems at school, one being the ability to use the bathroom of their choice. Trans students are harassed in the bathrooms and locker rooms and are forced to use the bathroom of their biological sex, even though they would rather use the bathroom of the other gender. 59% of trans students have been denied access to bathrooms consistent with their gender identity. Some schools ask transgender students to use the bathroom in the nurse's office or faculty bathroom, which can be embarrassing and further ostracizes the student from their peers. If the school will not allow the student to use the bathroom in which they feel most comfortable, one solution would be to create gender-neutral bathrooms. Transgender students are discriminated against in the classroom and bullied by other students as well. 75% of transgender youth feel unsafe at school, and those who are able to persevere have significantly lower GPAs and are more likely to miss school out of concern for their safety and are less likely to plan on continuing their education. When students say, "You're actually a boy," to a transgender male to female student, or "You're actually a girl" to a female to male student, this is a form of sexual violence. And it's not just the students who create an unsafe school atmosphere. Teachers and staff may refuse to use a different name or pronouns if the student has not legally changed their name and sex. Transgender students are punished for wearing clothes consistent with their gender identity and denied opportunities to go on field trips or participate in sports. This creates little support for trans students in their learning.
Do people treat you differently when they know you're transgender?
Yes, they do. They don't understand what the concept means, and they think that I'm weird and that I shouldn't have the same rights as them just because of what's between my legs.
They can't wrap their mind around the idea of a transgender kid. And I want to tell everybody they're wrong and show them Jazz, because when people meet her, they start to get it.
One, go.
Jazz has a handful of girlfriends. They've all started middle school, a challenging and precarious time, but especially for a transgender tween. She's enrolled in school as a girl, thanks to her parents' lobbying, and her passport even shows her as female. The faculty and some students know about her special situation. She uses the girls' bathroom and even plays on the girls' soccer team. You love to play soccer.
Yeah.
And you're pretty good at it, right?
Yeah.
But at the age of 8, she was banned from girls' soccer by league officials. What do you say to people who say, well, you know, she's biologically a boy, therefore she's stronger and she shouldn't be on that team?
I do not agree with them because I am like one of the smallest people on my team compared to the other girls. They're all very tall and more masculine, and I'm sort of smaller, but I am quicker.
Jazz fought back, and after a 2.5-year legal battle, won the right to play as a girl.
St. Pius graduation ceremony, the girls wear white gowns and the boys wear black. That's school policy. And St. Pius is insisting Damien is a girl.
I just want to have a happy graduation and just walk in my black robe, nice and proud, and just have a memory to look back on, you know, with my family and friends.
The St. Pius senior might not have that experience with fellow students next week.
I would rather not walk than to embarrass myself by wearing a female robe.
Garcia was born Brandy Garcia, but identifies as a male, even having a legal name change earlier this year. Fellow students, teachers, and faculty call Garcia Damien, and so does Damien's family.
I look at him and I call him my son, you know, and that's how he wishes to be acknowledged, is as a male.
The St. Pius tradition is for men to wear black gowns at graduation and women to wear white. The superintendent tells News 13 if there's any question on which gown a student should wear, the school goes by what the student's birth certificate says. Despite the new name, Damien's new birth certificate still says female. So the superintendent says Garcia can choose to wear the female gown or not walk across the stage at all.
Students need to learn what it means to be transgender. 90% of Americans say they personally know someone who is gay, lesbian, or bisexual, but only 8% of Americans say they personally know someone who is transgender. Most people learn about transgender people from the media, which does not always accurately portray the transgender community. Transgender characters are 40% of the time cast in a victim role, 21% are killers or villains, and 20% are sex workers. Even in news media, the transgender community is discriminated against. For example, the Chicago Sun-Times ran an article about transgender actress Laverne Cox saying she is not truly a woman and that transgender people are delusional. Health classes in school only discuss the cisgender community and don't use inclusive phrases that all people can identify with. Instead, students should learn about the transgender community in school, especially from transgender people themselves. To make transgender youth feel more comfortable in the learning place, every classroom should be a safe space where transgender students can feel comfortable dressing and acting like themselves, which includes allowing them to use the bathroom and locker room of their choice. Teachers and students should use the name and pronouns of the transgender student's choice as well. To make sure there is no discrimination, schools or school districts should have a written policy against discrimination based on gender identity and expression. There should be a strong anti-bullying policy in place that covers issues regarding gender, and teachers and staff should know how to enforce this policy. Even if there are no out transgender or gender non-conforming students, every school should implement these policies to create a safe space for students to come out and for future transgender students.
Hi, I'm Leah and I'm transgender. So basically what that means is that the gender I was assigned at birth didn't match how I felt inside. So I've kind of done things to make it match how I actually feel. When I was in school, I wasn't discriminated against too much. I did my best to kind of blend in. I was picked on a few times. It was mostly just uncomfortable with substitute teachers getting my pronouns and name wrong. Yeah, and just kind of misunderstandings that weren't exactly direct attacks. Also, my school was really great with figuring it all out. I went to a pretty good school where they worked with me. Eventually I was able to go to the bathrooms of my choice instead of being forced to go to somewhere where I was uncomfortable. If that hadn't happened and if they hadn't worked with me and my family on that, it would have been a much different high school experience, and I'm really grateful for that. And I think it's really important for schools and our societies to kind of just accept trans people and make sure that everything is just cool. We don't need to stress about it. We don't have to make a big deal. Trans people aren't out there to hurt you. So just making sure that schools are a safe place for people of all gender identities, sexualities, races, etc. I think that's just a very important thing to focus on.
Many women's colleges do not accept transgender male to female students, even though these students identify as women. Fortunately, some all-women's colleges such as Mount Holyoke and Wellesley have changed this policy to allow female students or students who identify as a woman. However, some transgender male students feel discriminated against at these schools, which creates a difficult situation. For example, professors and staff often refer to a group of students as women, even though there are male-identifying students in that group. This brings up the question if women's colleges are appropriate for today. Caroline Shelton, a sophomore at Mount Holyoke College, says, "I believe Mount Holyoke is doing a great thing by now accepting trans women into the college, because our whole goal as a historically all-women's college is to foster an environment where women can learn and achieve all that they're capable of. I believe that it shouldn't be up for discussion whether trans women should be admitted to our school or not. As for trans men, most tend to come to Mount Holyoke not openly trans or unaware that they are trans yet. I think that when they do transition, it's because they have found a home at Mount Holyoke and they shouldn't have to hide to feel safe. I know some trans men feel disillusioned with the women's college environment with the predominant use of female pronouns. However, I don't know how we should tackle that problem because it is so ingrained in the mission and history of our college. Another problem trans students face in higher level education is that most college applications and documents make people choose either male or female. Transgender students may be forced to choose the sex they were born as on official documents if they have not legally changed their sex. The University of Vermont recently added a third gender to their application and allows their students to choose a name and their own pronouns, regardless if they have legally changed their name or sex, which is definitely a positive step in creating a healthy and safe environment for all trans and gender non-conforming students.